Hello everyone. Today I will recap you a movie titled The Wicker Man. So make some tea and we'll start. The film begins with a Catholic church service. There the main character reads a sermon and goes through the communion procedure. Next, we see how the main character on a police seaplane flies over the water expanses, islands. The main character, a police officer with the rank of Sergeant Neil Howie, goes in search of the missing girl Rowan Morrison. He lands on the water and through a loudspeaker asks the locals standing on the shore to give him a boat. Those, apparently, are not particularly happy about his arrival and say that this is impossible, since the officer is on private territory and he needs permission. Neil says he's investigating the girl's disappearance, and they still provide him with a boat. On the shore, the officer communicates with the head of the port and fishermen and asks about the missing girl, showing her photo. All the men say they don't know this girl and have never seen her. At the same time, the men say they know Mae Morrison, who, according to the officer, is the mother of the missing girl, and send the officer to her store. The officer contacts Mae Morrison and shows her a photo of the missing girl. Mae claims that her daughter is not missing and that the photo does not show her daughter. She brings the officer to the counter and introduces him to her daughter. She's drawing a hair. An officer is talking to a girl. He asks the girl who is about the missing girl. The girl says that she knows her and that she runs around the fields all day, because now she is a hare. The officer goes to a local bar. When he enters, the music stops playing. He rents a room, and a pretty girl, the manager's daughter, comes into the room. When she appears, visitors begin to sing a song dedicated to her, releasing lascivious comments. The officer asks for attention and reports on his case, asks to inform him if someone knows something about the girl, but they again say that no one has seen her. The sergeant discovers a counter with photos from the harvest holidays, where the latter are missing. The sergeant asks the manager where she is. He replies that the frame is broken. The officer is served green beans for dinner, and he also learns that there are no apples on the island, which is famous for its fertility. After dinner, the officer goes for a walk. He sees an orgy taking place right on the street. He also sees people watering the grave and a naked girl sitting right on the tombstone. In the window of his room, the officer sees a man and the manager's daughter talking. A man gives her a gift in the form of a young man and he voluntarily goes to her. Then they say goodbye. The officer hears the sounds of copulation from the next room. The officer prays before going to bed and falls asleep. In the morning, the officer asks the manager's daughter where the school is and goes there. Along the way, he stumbles upon a ritual. People dance around a tree and sing a song about turning a person into a tree. Approaching the school, the officer hears the teacher's conversation through the window. She tells the children about the tree, a symbol that is used in their and similar religions as a symbol of the rebirth of nature. An officer enters the classroom and asks a few questions. He tells the teacher that he has discovered a lot of oddities in this city and it all starts at school, says that he will bring information about it to the competent authorities. The officer turns to the children and asks them about the missing girl. They say they don't know her, but the officer notices an empty table. He opens it and sees a bug tied to a nail. Neil says he wants to look through a cool magazine and finds the name of the missing girl there. He goes outside with the teacher. She says that this girl does not exist. The officer asks if she died, to which the teacher tells about their faith and that they believe that after death the human soul is reborn in trees or animals. She says that the girl's body is buried in the territory adjacent to the church, but the church is no longer used for Christian worship. At the cemetery, the officer finds a gravedigger and the grave of the missing girl. The gravedigger says that the girl died 6 months ago. A rowan tree was planted on her grave and, according to the gravedigger, the girl's umbilical cord is hanging on her branch. Neil goes in search of documents about the girl's death. On the way, he also discovers the use of alternative medicine. The girl is forced to take a frog in her mouth to cure a sore throat. He goes to the Department of Registration of Deaths and Births, but finds no information about the death of the missing girl there. Neil decides to contact the minister of the island to get permission to open the burial of the girl. On the way, he sees another ritual, naked girls dancing around a fire and jumping over it. He comes to the minister's castle and asks for permission to exhume the body. The priest says they are very religious people, and there is no point in opening the grave, because no one killed the girl. The men had a religious dispute. The minister says that paganism was adopted on the island by his grandfather, who bought this island in the last century. The officer condemns their religion, but the minister does not pay attention to it and still gives permission for exhumation. When Neil opened the grave, he found a hare there. He returns to the estate and throws this hair at the feet of the minister. Having received no information from him, the officer sums up his trip. He arrived on the island, where everyone claims that they have never seen this girl. Later he finds out that the girl died and was buried, and when he opened her grave, he found a hair instead of a body. The officer assumes that the girl was killed during a pagan ritual, and is going to return to the mainland to report this to higher authorities. The minister says that it is good that the sergeant will not be here tomorrow, because tomorrow there will be a May Day ritual, which the sergeant will most likely not like. The sergeant enters the photographer's back room and finds there a photo from the last harvest festival and discovers that last year's harvest has died, and the missing girl is depicted in the photo. At night, the manager's daughter sings a song that the officer hears through the wall and calls him to her room. In the morning, the girl says that she tried to invite him to her room. The officer goes to the library and searches for information about rituals. He learns that 3 main figures take part in the May Day ritual: a man-woman, an evil lover of pranks, played by a priest or a representative of the authorities, a man with a horse on a stick who throws himself at girls, and a fool man, the most complex of symbolic figures. The character is a privileged jerk or a king for an hour, for these numbers are followed by 6. This ceremony was enhanced by the sacrifice. In harvest years, vegetables and fruits were sacrificed, and in case of crop failures, people could also be sacrificed. The victim could be thrown into the sea or burned on a sacrificial bonfire. Sometimes 6 soldiers cut off the victim's head. The officer goes to the plane to call for reinforcements, but it turns out that his plane broke down and won't start. The officer decides to look for the girl himself, because he understands that she is alive and will be sacrificed today. After an unsuccessful search, he returns to his room to rest. At this time, the manager and his daughter throw incense in the form of a man's hand into the officer's room, because of which he has to fall asleep for a couple of days, but he manages to extinguish it, unnoticed by the madman. After that, he goes to the manager's room, where he changes into a clown costume. The officer knocks out and ties up the manager, puts on his suit and goes to the ceremony. During the ceremony, the man-woman notices that the fool man is not very actively involved in the ceremony. The officer sees a man in a hair costume in the cart. The procession is approaching large stones similar to Stonehenge. 6 swordsmen cross swords, and the whole procession sticks its head into the hole between the swords. When a man in a hair costume approaches, the music stops, and the swordsmen pretend to chop off their heads. The mask falls off the girl, but not from the head. The procession goes to the seashore, where a sacrifice is made to the sea in the form of ale. A male-female, who is also a minister, announces a more serious victim. An officer in a clown costume sees a missing girl with her hands tied and tries to save her. Together they escape from the others through the cave and leave it. At the exit, they are met by the minister and several other people. Rowan hugs the minister and he tells her she was great. The officer doesn't understand what's going on. He looks down and sees the water breaking on the rocks. The minister says the game is over, the game of the victim chasing the hunter. The officer himself came to the appointed place at the appointed time. The minister says that everything was planned so that the officer himself would come here and be sacrificed. A lot of people in animal masks appear over the horizon. Neil tries to leave, but is grabbed and held in place. He is wearing a ritual white shirt. The officer says he is a Christian and hopes for resurrection. The minister says it's time for the victim to get to know the Wicker Man. The officer tries to dissuade the pagans from sacrificing, but he fails, and we see a Wicker Man. The officer screams and resists. He is placed inside a Wicker Man. There are also pigs and other victims inside. The minister prays to the sun god, and the participants of the procession repeat his words. Neil screams, cursing them, begging them to stop. The Wicker Man is set on fire, and in the rays of sunset, under the singing of pagans and the cries of burning animals, he burns. And the main character prays for the last time and showers pagans with curses. Pagans dance and sing, looking at the burning Wicker Man.